Dan Watanabe, and my apologies for not doing the video update in quite a while, but it's been a crazy time, as I'm sure it's been for everyone. And a lot has changed in the industry, and so have a lot of the deliverables that you need to have if you want a career in entertainment. I am going to be gearing these videos for a while to those who are entering the entertainment industry because I feel that right now there is a serious gap in the marketplace that's dealing with the industry as an always changing medium. And those rules that were applying up until the middle of 2023 no longer apply. We've already seen what's happened with a lot of box office failures, a lot of reorganization and streaming, and most importantly, a lot of changes happening in the world of technology. To that end, today we're going to talk about AI. Is it a savior or is it a Satan as far as the entertainment industry is concerned? I'll also talk about certain things about AI in general. And I know it's controversial and I know it's very early in AI's history. So there's a lot of propaganda going on either side, either for AI being something that will cause the economy to rebound, or as AI being an instrument by which all other jobs will be rendered, or a ton of regular jobs will be rendered obsolete. My take is the jury is still out. However, when I first entered the entertainment industry, I was from the very last year where you could graduate from college without ever touching a computer. Yes, it is possible to have been from that world and still be alive and kicking today. So let me tell you what happened, because I was one of the very first people to enter the workforce where having to be at least somewhat familiar with the way that computers worked was becoming an increasingly important requirement. And during that time, one of the ways that I was able to get ahead was, first of all, I could type 120 words a minute. Secondly, I knew how to hack WordStar. And if any of you have a vague memory of WordStar, it was this horrible program that was very tiny and was really difficult to run in terms of the ease with which word processing programs are today. And because I knew how to run WordStar, I could run everything. I ran SperryLink and Microsoft Word and WordPerfect and Xywrite and DisplayWrite and all these other names that you've never heard of, thank God. But at that time, there was a similar panic throughout the entire workforce that's very similar to the panic that's going on today surrounding AI. And that is, there was a fear that these new computers were going to make the common worker obsolete. And what ended up happening was that it ended up increasing the workforce, because the more that the technology could do as it advanced, the more it turned out you needed the human interface. Moreover, it gave a lot of people who were stuck in clerical ghetto jobs an opportunity to upskill by just going to community college or taking a workshop, and suddenly be able to skill up and move forward with higher pay rates. So I believe that that opportunity is most likely going to be there, while I still have the same hesitations about AI. So I thought what we do is we look at AI specifically as how it helps the entertainment industry or hurts it. First of all, the number one way that AI, I believe, can be beneficial to the world of entertainment is that it can make certain jobs easier. Take, for example, the job of a first AD or a script supervisor, first assistant director or script supervisor. These are both jobs where you have to pretty much walk around with a script in your head and track all of the changes, track everything that's going on the set, make sure you're making your days, and a whole host of other things. AI, which is largely used anyway, as it advances, can be used even more effectively. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you're constantly doing revisions on screenplays, which is apt to happen with scheduling changes and having to move stuff around and looking at some of the footage that's coming through and realizing you might have to make some alterations. What's nice about AI, especially for lower budget productions where you do not have the option in post of reshooting half of your movie, you need to make sure you get it right the first time. And one of the most troubling things that happens, especially in a production that's lower, that's a little bit of a lower budget, is you're often changing things because of needing to shoot a scene over. So you're having to move the schedule, but you don't want to increase the budget. So that means you're going to have to sacrifice something. And often you're also pressured with end dates for stars, because many times a star will be willing to do your lower budget movie provided it fits in their schedule. So you might have to shoot them out really quickly, and heaven forbid that you have to redo certain scenes, take dialogue and put it in someone else's mouth. Over the course of time, a few lines of dialogue that pay off a scene or build to a scene might get moved, and they get moved again, and they get moved again, and suddenly a scene gets dropped and people lose track of that line. And I know that everyone's supposed to keep track of everything, but unless it's something that is top of mind, after something gets moved 5 or 6 times, you might forget it. You might forget that that line went in a scene that you later on eliminated. Now, what do? You're going to have to either shoot something or just have a scene that happens out of nowhere, or you have a buildup to something that doesn't pay off. And that's actually a best case scenario. Yeah, you might go and reshoot, but do you really want to spend the money? That's always something that's a challenge, but AI can help that. Another thing where AI can be very beneficial is in the world of marketing. And this is an area where I feel the entertainment industry is very lacking right now. There seems to have been lost a sense of how to advertise a movie properly before it drops theatrically, how to advertise a television series effectively. What are the different venues where you have to have someone appear? And sometimes it's downright shocking how a movie or a TV show will go out there without adequate support, or worse, will have an ad campaign that doesn't work. Now, one of the beauties of AI is that it is an internal database, which has a lot more material even than if you're going on one of the search engines and typing in things that you might want to reference to. Truly, a challenge with entertainment today, and yes, I'm an alta cocker. I'm going to say it's worse than ever, because that's what we do. Trust me, I've been through 4 very cataclysmic changes within the entertainment industry, and it's always led to a renaissance in one area or another, usually an unexpected sector. So despite the fact the industry's in chaos right now, I actually believe a renaissance is around the corner, and we'll be talking about that more later in other episodes. But by and large, this is where AI can come in handy, because it can position a movie that you, or a TV show that you are doing now, historically. And I know there's a lot of people who feel that anything that happened before 2013 is irrelevant. It's not true. But because Hollywood has a very bad habit of repeating its patterns over and over and over again. And this time, I was very distressed with the number of people who were around when I was starting and when I was first becoming an executive, and they made the same mistakes with AI that were made with home video. But see, they don't have a get out of jail free card because they were born after all this happened. No, they were in the industry when it did happen. So why would you make the exact same mistakes that took down that era if you're seeing it happen in streaming? Again, we'll play around with that a little bit more. But But what can happen with AI is they can say, well, look, we're in a period where the economy looks a little bit unstable. Well, what are some times when the entertainment industry has thrived when the economy is unstable? Can we mention the Great Depression? Can we mention the post-war disillusionment period? Can we mention the 1970s, especially during the post-Nixon White House? Can we mention after the dot-com bust? So there have been plenty of times when the industry has been challenged, but has been able to maintain, to regain, if not maintain, its footing. So knowing how they handled these challenges in the past, you can kind of look at a project and say, let's look at what's been done before and see what the commonality has been in previous eras when this has happened, and tie it in to maybe a way that you can market a particular title that's a little bit off. Remember, I worked on Baywatch, and on Baywatch, one of the big surprises was that its core audience was never nasty-minded young men. It was always females 35 plus. And the show happened to maintain that audience for over 11 years. And even though Baywatch is hardly high art, there was a reason it succeeded in a group that no one expected. And in fact, many shows have, and movies have audiences that they didn't expect, but the movie happened to catch on. As someone who is doing distribution or marketing, having that ability to say, oh, you know what, at this period, this audience, which we didn't think was our core, turned out to be. Maybe we should see if there's a way to make this tie in for the current situation and market it to that same need that audiences have. So the walking database that can be AI can be an enormous resource for people who aren't walking encyclopedias of Hollywood trivia. Yeah, I admit, I learned my entire film history because instead of paying attention in math class, thereby dooming me to be one of the few Asians who cannot do math, I would spend my time doing Academy Award quizzes with some of my other friends who were very, very trivia centric. And it's because of that that I was always walking around with a database of just insane facts about things that worked when they shouldn't have, how you handled controversial material, how you were able to get past scandals, how you could take a personality and figure out what their most troubling aspect was and turn that into the reason they become a star. So that's another area where AI can be enormously helpful. Further, there's a lot of paranoia, especially on the side of writers, that AI could be writing their scripts. Maybe, but let's get real. There's only about 7 real stories that get recombined over and over and over again with the creator's distinct voice that comes from their experience, comes from everyone they've ever known, comes from their family histories, comes from their ethnic background, comes from whatever their socioeconomic position has been throughout their lives. And all of that gets mixed in to where you can have multiple versions of the exact same one-liner that do not resemble each other in the least. So it is that human element. Moreover, in 1934, when the Writers Guild was first constituted, amongst their initial articles of incorporation, they included a sentence that said that the definition of someone that the studios would hire was a real person, meaning a human male or female, who was a member of the Writers Guild. And those were the only people the studio could use as writers. Well, at that moment, since 1934, you were protected unless that particular clause was removed. from ever creating something entirely with AI. But you wouldn't want to create something thoroughly with AI. It doesn't work. Anyway, so how about actors? Well, actors had a little bit more of a struggle. And one of the struggles that they had was that their image could be infinitely reproduced. And we all know that if you're on your way up and someone says, sign this piece of paper that entitles them to use of your image, that you either sign it or you don't get the job. And so most of the time, you'll sign it even if it's under duress. But the new SAG contract makes sure that there is a payment ongoing that gets assigned to that image of you every time it's used. So there has been a protection built in. And, if you're saying, well, I'm a background person and I'm going to lose my job because they can endlessly make things with AI. Well, yes and no, because there's a lot of times when people assume that digital technology, because it's done differently, is cheaper. But in the age of CGI, one of the many hypes that came up was that you could actually shoot everything on a green screen and have the set built in later. Except that ended up costing more because you have to design every single element of that set. And I know today you'll say, well, we'll just use AI to do it. But would you? Because the problem with AI is it's never accurate in quite the same way. And what do I mean by that? I mean that AI has certain fingerprints that go against this idea that it's perfect. Because what ends up happening is that if you look at pictures that were done with AI, and often low budget production companies try to do posters with it, they don't work. Now, this is going to sound counterintuitive, but when you stare at a picture long enough, what ends up happening is your brain fills in missing pieces. So something that's AI that shouldn't really work because it's got a lot of minor problems with it, you might just not see it because your brain's filling it in and correcting stuff. But when you're flipping through a lot of pictures really fast, your subconscious picks up on the problem like that. And at that moment, you will scroll right past it. I'm not going to say anything about Tinder being the same way, but it is. So you don't want to be in that position where somebody just doesn't respond to the picture that you've created because there's some little thing in it that makes them say this isn't real. It's not artistically compelling. It is not emotionally satisfying. And we're going to go over some things where you actually see the fingerprints of misdesign hurting the overall marketing of a movie or TV show. Now, let's talk about some of the dangers of AI. The number one danger is it has been overhyped. And what do I mean by that? I mean, all you see on social media feeds when they're talking about AI is they're all predicting this world where it's almost as if if you're a boss, you don't need to have employees anymore. If you're an employee, hey, you're going to get to spend the rest of your life being a poet because you're not going to be needed for most jobs. But we all know that's not a reality because look at the problems that have emerged at the same time. Can we mention Gemini getting busted when it first hit the public with the Founding Fathers scandal, where you would put in a search for pictures of the founders of the United States, and what would you get? You get nothing but non-Caucasians. And that's not to say there weren't non-Caucasians, but that was certainly not the majority. And anyone who remembers Google going back multiple years, you would put in Renaissance paintings and they would give you non-Caucasian Renaissance paintings, which was fascinating in a way, but it also wasn't what you were looking for. And so this has been an embed. And the problem with AI is like with anything computers, garbage in, garbage out. You feed it bad data, you're going to get garbage. And sure enough, we've seen that happen. We've seen it happen as AI's general copyright scrape, meaning that they keep saying, that the New York Times is suing AI because they're saying this is not fair use. And I gotta tell you, it looks very bad when trillion-dollar companies are pleading poverty and saying that we can't survive if we can't steal all of the previous things that have ever been created to give us our databases. I'm sorry, that's not fair use. And it's really weird coming from a company from companies that are trying to destroy the individual artist and appeal to the business community that you don't need to hire people anymore. So yeah, plus the EU is not happy with the amount of things that have been stolen and how it gets repurposed and how certain artistic tropes are taken without the artist's permission, and it's clear where they got their inspiration from. So so there's a lot of stuff that's still to be gone through. And even without that, we have two very, very serious challenges. One of them is drift, and that is when AI picks up information that's that's might be accurate, but it might be irrelevant to your discussion, or might be out of context, or it might just be an older thought that happened to be published in a more recent book. So it becomes a problem. The worse than that is hallucinations. And we've heard that happen where lawyers have been preparing briefs using AI, even though they're getting paid hundreds of dollars an hour. I mean, come on. And then a judge will say, that statute doesn't exist. Now you look like an idiot. Plus, the judge threatens to have your license pulled, your bar license pulled, because you're not doing due diligence for your clients. And not only, and further, for researchers, they'll do something with AI, and all of a sudden there'll be a hallucination of a reference, and that reference doesn't exist. So yeah, you can say, well, we're going to fix this, we're fixing it, it's been fixed, but people are continually find more ways to trick it. And it's not just how do you keep the cheese from falling off the pizza? Well, you mix it with glue. Yeah, that's funny and it's a bad piece of advice, but it was still there. And heaven forbid a doctor's using AI and it hallucinates a bad combination of drugs and someone ends up dead. So this part of AI still needs a lot of human handholding. Moreover, let's talk about in academia. Even though I have given my students, a kind of a lecture on why plagiarism is bad, and I pointed out to them that there's a real serious issue when you plagiarize in an academic environment, because as much as you might think that there's endless numbers of textbooks and articles and all of that, when you come down to something that someone's going to write a term paper about, most of the time, it's going to come from a fairly limited group of books. Because you don't want to use a book from the 70s unless you're actually comparing the pedagogy from then to pedagogy today. I know it's a fancy word for education. I can't help it. I finally got my master's. Anyway, but more than that, a lot of times those sources get used in newer sources over and over and over again. And so bad pieces of information get brought along with it, which only becomes worse when you mix AI with that, because now you have a conglomeration of real information, bad information, mistaken information, all becoming source. And here's where it becomes even more challenging than plagiarism. Because I mean, I was always able to read a student's term paper and say, okay, you stole some of this from Movie Made America, you took some of this from Susan Sontag, you took some of this from Molly Haskins, and you just know because of certain word usage. The other challenge that students have, and where I've busted students, is that AI's writing pattern, because most of the stuff that it's stealing is going to come from people who tended to be a little bit older. And the general age of a lot of those authors who, before they get to the point where they can be considered real experts, more often than not, they're somewhere between their mid-30s and their mid-50s. You get too much beyond your mid-50s, and all of a sudden you're way out of date, and you're just an old albacocker. Or if you, and I'm in that group, or if you're too much younger, you don't have perspective. So what ends up happening is that each of those writers is going to write using both academic and common vernacular, using words from either when they were in education or when they became really professional. So that means that a lot of times you'll have someone who's 18 to 22 trying to write a paper that's full of jargon that says, oh no, the wording you use, the sentence structure you use, your way of picking references are all things that indicate that this was from AI. Now, I'll give you another very pertinent example. I threw out a question to students, and one of the options of it, it's a documentary class, one of the options in it was that they could watch a documentary, and I had a bunch of them in there, but you could choose your own. And 7 or 8 of them wrote the exact same essay inadvertently. Now, were they exactly the same words? Nope. Did they have the exact same references? Nope. Did they come to the same conclusions? Not really. But what was similar? They all referenced a YouTube video, and a nature video. They didn't specify the title or who the channel was. All of them said they were incredibly moved by certain of the images. And all of them said that this was something that caused them to feel that even though it was a YouTube video, that it was an inspiration for them. Again, none of the same words. Every one of the essays was 7 paragraphs. Not only that, every one of the essays used similar descriptors. And use the same descriptors, but they used similar descriptors where they were talking about the documentary using things that were deliberately non-specific. Well, the cinematography was really good, and I was especially impressed by this view of the coral reefs and the environmental degradation that was happening to them. What environmental degradation? What coral reef? Why? And of course, no, I didn't fail them and make their lives miserable, but I did use this as a value lesson. And I asked each of them a question, and they got busted. I mean, and the question I asked wasn't that hard a question. You know what my first question was? Was the narrator male or female? No one was smart enough to say there was no narrator or something like that, which would have gotten them out of that. But they couldn't really say, because then I'd have follow-up questions. Oh, it was a female. What made her special about her knowledge? You don't want to do it. You don't want to do it. What's another challenge? Well, AI cannot be copyrighted. Now, I'm sure that you've all seen ads where they say, put in a really good prompt, we'll create the entire book for you that you can then sell. How are you going to sell it? Anyone else can come up with the exact same general prompt and pretty much get the same book. Let me tell you another anecdote. I've worked a lot in the world of grants. And most recently, there was a number of grants that went out for funding. And the grant readers came back and told among the 300 submissions, 300 plus submissions for money, told over 200, and that's 2/3. You submit another AI generated proposal and you will be barred from submitting for 3 years. Why did that happen? These weren't the same proposals, but they looked alike. They had the same general layout. They had the same general headings. They had the same general pictures, with just some of the people in the pictures changed. This has also happened when people are putting in bids for loans. People are looking at on the banking end, they're looking at it and saying, this is an AI created prospectus. So there are problems that are coming up with it right now that haven't quite come down to the laity. But in the entertainment industry, one of the big things that's getting a lot of publicity now is you use Unreal Engine. How many people have been paying attention to what happened with Unreal in the world of gaming? They just got hugely slammed. So there's a possibility that you have a lot of money being spent on building these studios built around the result, the Unreal Engine that might now be orphan software. And again, audiences know the difference. Do not underestimate the audience. And remember that CGI was meant to decrease budgets. What has it done? It's increased budgets, much more so than practical effects. So every time there's an advancement in technology that looks like it can replace humans, so far, and again, I'm going all the way back to the dawn of personal computers, every single innovation that was supposed to help bottom lines by eliminating people ended up costing more. So I believe that's what's going to happen. What does this mean for Hollywood? What it means for Hollywood is Hollywood needs to stop trying to think, or at least the C-suite, the executive class, needs to stop being obsessed with thinking of ways to get over and go back to thinking of ways to engage the population. Because that, after all, is why we go to the movies, or perhaps more recently, why we're not going.
I got whatever Lola wants,